A rich person can make a mistake and call it a bad week. A poor person can make the same mistake and lose the next 6 months. That is the part people pretend not to understand. They talk about responsibility as if every decision exists in isolation, as if one late payment is just one late payment, one parking ticket is just one parking ticket, one missed shift is just one missed shift. But money does not work that way when there is none behind it. A mistake at the bottom does not stay the size it was when it happened. It grows. It attaches itself to other parts of your life. It finds your rent, your job, your credit score, your car, your sleep, your patience, your relationships. And by the time it is done moving through the system, the original mistake almost looks innocent compared to what it became. You forget about a bill. Not a huge bill. Not a life-changing bill. Maybe $68 for electricity, maybe $42 for a phone plan, maybe a minimum credit card payment you meant to handle on Friday because Friday is payday and payday is when your life briefly feels like it has structure again. You saw the notification. You did not ignore it exactly. You just moved it mentally to a later place, because everything in your life is always being moved to a later place. The bill does not care. The due date arrives before your paycheck does. The late fee appears. Then the next balance is higher. Then the next month starts already damaged. For someone with money, this is annoying. They open the app, pay the balance, maybe turn on autopay, maybe complain for 40 seconds and forget about it. The mistake disappears into the cushion around their life. But when you are poor, there is no cushion. There is only the floor. So the mistake does not land softly. It hits something hard and breaks into smaller problems. The late fee is $25. The reconnect fee is $35. The overdraft fee is $34. The phone bill goes unpaid, and now the phone service gets interrupted. You need the phone for work, for the two-factor code, for the job application, for the school call, for the landlord, for the mechanic, for the bank, for the child care message that tells you pickup time changed. The phone was not a luxury. It was infrastructure. But the system prices it like a product and punishes its absence like a personal failure. This is how poverty converts inconvenience into instability. The car does not start. That is all. One morning, the engine turns over wrong, or it does not turn over at all. There is no music. There is no dramatic silence. Just the sound of something expensive refusing to happen. You sit there for a second with the key in your hand, already knowing the answer before the mechanic says it. Battery, alternator, starter, tire, brake pads, transmission if the universe is feeling creative. The estimate is $420. Maybe $780. Maybe $1,300, which is a number that makes your face stay calm because your body has not decided what emotion to use yet. A rich person pays it. A middle-class person complains and moves some money from savings. A poor person starts negotiating with the weak. Can you miss work? No. Because missing work means losing hours, and losing hours means next week's paycheck is smaller, and next week's paycheck was already assigned to rent before it arrived. Can you Uber? Maybe, but the round trip costs $38, and you make $15 an hour before taxes, which means you are now paying money to earn less money than you needed. Can you borrow a car? Maybe once. Maybe twice. But favors have expiration dates, especially when everyone around you is also one problem away from needing help. So the broken car is not just a broken car. It is a threat to employment. Employment is a threat to rent. Rent is a threat to housing. Housing is a threat to everything. This is what people miss when they say poor people should just plan better. They imagine planning as a spreadsheet. But at the bottom, planning is closer to weather survival. You are not deciding between ideal options. You are deciding which leak to let spread because you only have one bucket. And there is always someone watching your decision from a distance, calling it irresponsible. You put the repair on a credit card because the car has to move. The card has a 27% interest rate because the people who most need cheap credit are considered too risky to receive it. This is one of the cleaner cruelties of the financial system. The less room you have to make mistakes, the more expensive the rescue becomes. Your emergency does not qualify you for help. It qualifies you for worse terms. You tell yourself you will pay it off quickly. And maybe you mean it. Most people mean it. That is another thing people misunderstand. Bad financial decisions are often made by people who know exactly why the decision is bad. They are not confused. They are trapped in a timeline where the bad option is the only option that solves the problem before Monday. The car gets fixed. You go back to work. Nothing has improved. The crisis has simply been converted into debt. Now every month, part of your paycheck is paying for a problem that is already over. The car starts fine now, but the payment remains. That is how the past keeps billing the poor. One repair, one hospital visit, one gap between checks, one emergency charge that had to happen because life did not wait for liquidity. The event ends. The balance does not. And while you are paying for the old problem, the new problem arrives. The rent goes up by $125. The email is polite. It uses neutral language. Market conditions. Updated pricing. Lease renewal. Nothing in the message acknowledges that $125 is not just $125. It is groceries for a week. It is a utility bill. It is the difference between paying the credit card minimum and watching the balance grow. It is a number small enough for the landlord to present as reasonable and large enough to change the way you breathe. For someone with margin, a rent increase is a lifestyle adjustment. Fewer dinners out. Delay a purchase. Move money around. For someone without margin, it is an eviction schedule written slowly. You do the math. Everyone poor knows this math. Not high-level finance, not investing, not tax strategy. Survival arithmetic. Rent plus electricity plus phone plus insurance plus gas plus food plus the debt from the last emergency plus the thing you forgot, because there is always a thing you forgot. The numbers do not fit. You add them again. They still do not fit. You remove food first because food is flexible in a way rent is not. Then you remove sleep because more work is possible in a way more money is not. Then you remove health because appointments cost money and time is currently serving rent. That is the hidden hierarchy of poverty. You do not pay the most important thing first. You pay the thing with the fastest punishment. The landlord punishes faster than your body. The bank punishes faster than your teeth. The car punishes faster than your friendships. So you pay the landlord. You pay the bank. You keep the car running. And your body waits quietly, collecting interest. Then the tooth starts hurting. At first it is not serious. It is a pulse when you drink something cold. Then it is a sharper pulse. Then it is there when you are not eating. Then it wakes you up at 3:17 in the morning with a kind of pain that makes every financial theory in the world sound stupid. You need a dentist. You know that. But knowing is not the same as being able to go. The exam costs money. The X-ray costs money. The procedure costs money. Taking the day off costs money. Even finding out the real price costs money. So you wait. Not because you are careless. Because waiting is the only medical plan available to people whose budget has no empty space in it. You take painkillers. You chew on the other side. You tell yourself it is getting better because for 2 hours it hurts less. Then it gets worse. By the time you go in, the small cavity is no longer a small cavity. The cheaper fix has expired. The problem that could have been solved early now costs 3 times more because poverty turned delay into damage. This happens everywhere. In teeth, in cars, in credit, in housing, in mental health, in legal problems, in relationships, in paperwork. Poor people are constantly punished for waiting, but they are also often unable to afford acting early. The system rewards early intervention and then charges admission at the door. So one mistake becomes 2. The bill you delayed becomes a fee. The fee becomes a balance. The balance becomes interest. The interest becomes a lower credit score. The lower credit score becomes higher insurance. Higher insurance becomes less monthly margin. Less margin makes the next mistake more likely. That is the loop. Not a character flaw. A feedback system. The parking ticket is $85. It happens on a street you do not normally park on because your usual spot was full and you were late. Maybe the sign was confusing. Maybe you saw it and took the chance. Maybe you did something wrong. That part almost does not matter. The envelope is on the windshield, folded under the wiper like a small accusation. You stand there for a moment holding it, already tired from a punishment that has not even fully started. If you have money, you pay it and feel irritated. If you do not, the ticket becomes a decision. Pay it now and short the grocery budget. Wait and risk the late penalty. Contest it and lose half a day you cannot afford to lose. Ignore it because you have 3 more urgent problems, and then one day the fee doubles. Then registration becomes harder. Then maybe the city adds collections. Then a small mistake made during a rushed afternoon becomes one more institution with your name in its mouth. The amount is never just the amount. That is the central lie in how people talk about money. They say, "It is only $85. But $85 is different depending on where it lands. In one life, it lands on a padded surface and disappears. In another, it lands on a stack of unpaid obligations and knocks something loose. Money is not just money. Money is shock absorption. This is why poor people seem tense about things that other people think are small. They are not overreacting to the event. They are reacting to the chain they know the event can start. They are not afraid of the $85. They are afraid of what the $85 will touch. You see this in the grocery store. The card declines. Not always because there is no money. Sometimes because the deposit has not cleared. Sometimes because a subscription renewed overnight. Sometimes because the gas station hold is still pending. Sometimes because the bank processed transactions in an order that makes no emotional sense to the person trying to buy milk. The cashier looks neutral because cashiers see this every day. The people behind you pretend not to watch, which is worse than watching. You remove items. Not random items. The most expensive ones first. Meat. Laundry detergent. The thing your kid asked for. The small thing you put in the cart because you wanted one normal moment. A rich person can have a card declined because of fraud protection and laugh. A poor person has a card declined and feels their entire social position revealed in public. That humiliation has a cost too. Not financial at first. Psychological. But psychological costs eventually become financial because stressed people make shorter decisions. They avoid calls. They ignore mail. They stop opening apps because every app is a room where bad news waits. They delay the exact things that need attention because attention itself has become painful. This is one of the quietest ways poverty reproduces itself. It trains you to avoid information. You know you should check the balance. You know you should open the bill. You know you should call the lender, the landlord, the clinic, the insurance company. But each call might reveal a number you cannot solve, and the brain is not designed to calmly collect threats it has no power to answer. So you wait. The unopened envelope sits on the counter. The notification stays unread. The voicemail becomes a small weight in your pocket. You are not being lazy. You are trying to preserve enough emotional energy to function through the day. But the system does not distinguish between avoidance and inability. It only records non-response. No response becomes late. Late becomes delinquent. Delinquent becomes reported. Reported becomes score damage. Score damage becomes a higher deposit for an apartment, higher interest on a car, worse credit offers, fewer options. The system does not need to hate you to hurt you. It only needs to be automatic. And automatic systems are brutal to people whose lives require context. Your paycheck is late by 2 days. The rent is not. The bank account overdrafts. The fee posts before the payroll deposit. The landlord charges a late fee before the employer apologizes. The credit card autopay hits before the refund clears. Every institution acts as if its date is the only date that matters. Your life is a calendar collision, and every collision charges you. A wealthier person experiences timing errors as inconvenience. A poorer person experiences timing errors as damage. The same 2 days. Completely different consequences. This is why the phrase, living paycheck to paycheck, does not fully describe it. It sounds like a rhythm. It sounds like money arrives and money leaves, and the person is simply not saving enough. But the reality is more fragile than that. Living paycheck to paycheck means your entire life is balanced on timing. The paycheck has to arrive before rent. The rent has to clear before the overdraft. The gas has to last until Friday. The child care payment has to wait until the second deposit. The prescription has to stretch 3 more days. You are not managing money. You are managing sequence. And sequence is unforgiving. One wrong order, and the month breaks. The poor are often accused of having no discipline by people who have never needed this much of it. It takes discipline to decide which bill can survive being late. It takes discipline to keep showing up to work when the work does not move you forward. It takes discipline to answer a collector politely when you have $14 in checking and 3 more calls behind it. It takes discipline to make dinner from whatever is left because buying something quick would solve tonight and damage Friday. It takes discipline to not collapse when the number in the app says the same thing it said last month, even though you worked every day in between. But this kind of discipline is invisible because it does not produce wealth. It only prevents collapse. That is another cruelty. The effort required to stay poor can be greater than the effort required to become comfortable once comfort has already been reached. When you have savings, problems become transactions. When you do not, problems become negotiations with your own stability. A broken tire is not a tire. It is a schedule change, a debt decision, an argument, a missed shift, a smaller grocery trip, and maybe the beginning of a lower credit score if you choose the wrong payment to delay. The rich are not better at handling emergencies. They just get to keep emergencies in their original category. Medical problem stays medical. Car problem stays mechanical. Legal problem stays legal. Housing problem stays administrative. But for the poor, every problem becomes financial, and then every financial problem becomes emotional, and then every emotional problem becomes behavioral, and then the behavior is judged as if it appeared from nowhere. You snap at someone. You forget something. You miss a deadline. You do not return a call. You look unreliable because your life is full of small fires that no one else can see. And once you look unreliable, opportunities become thinner. Managers schedule someone else. Friends stop asking. Family members get tired. Institutions flag you. The world begins to treat the symptoms of pressure as proof that you deserve the pressure. This is where poverty becomes identity from the outside. Not because you chose it. Because enough systems have interacted with you as if you are risky, late, difficult, unstable, or low value that eventually those labels start shaping what is available. You pay more for insurance because your credit is worse. Your credit is worse because you paid late. You paid late because the car broke. The car broke because you could only afford the cheaper one. You bought the cheaper one because financing a better one came with a rate designed for someone like you. Someone like you. That phrase is where the system hides its verdict. And the strange thing is that almost everyone understands this when it happens upward. If a rich person uses a connection, people call it networking. If a poor person asks for help, people call it dependence. If a rich person restructures debt, it is strategy. If a poor person does it, it is desperation. If a rich person makes a risky investment, it is ambition. If a poor person takes a risky job, risky loan, risky move, it is irresponsibility. The action is judged through the balance sheet of the person performing it. Money changes the moral interpretation of behavior. The same mistake looks different when made by someone expected to recover. That is why being poor means living with less forgiveness. Not legally, not officially, not in a way anyone puts on a sign. But practically. Every mistake is interpreted faster and punished harder because there is no evidence, in the form of money, that you will be fine. A wealthy person can be disorganized and still look creative. A poor person is disorganized and becomes a risk. A wealthy person can take time off and call it rest. A poor person takes time off and falls behind. A wealthy person can have a messy season. A poor person has a pattern. And once the pattern is written down, it follows you. It follows you into apartment applications. It follows you into car loans. It follows you into job background checks in places where credit history should have nothing to do with whether you can show up and work. It follows you into insurance pricing. It follows you into the way customer service talks to you when your account is already marked. Poverty leaves paperwork. And paperwork has a longer memory than people do. One mistake at the bottom does not end when you fix it. It leaves a record that changes the price of future survival. This is why emergency funds are spoken about so often and built so rarely. Everyone knows the advice. Save 3 to 6 months of expenses. Build a cushion. Pay yourself first. It sounds clean because advice is usually written from a distance. But the first $1,000 is not just hard to save because people lack discipline. It is hard because every time the amount begins to exist, life recognizes it as available. You save $200. The tire blows. You save $400. The child gets sick. You save $650. Work cuts hours. You save $900. Rent rises. The emergency fund becomes less like a staircase and more like a sandcastle built near water. You keep rebuilding the thing that keeps getting taken by events that wealthier people would barely remember. And after enough times, a person can start to feel foolish for trying. That feeling is dangerous. Not because it is weak, but because it is logical. If every attempt to get ahead is immediately consumed by the next problem, the brain starts protecting itself by expecting less. You stop making long plans because long plans have been repeatedly humiliated by short emergencies. You stop imagining stability because imagination itself starts to feel expensive. You focus on the week. Then the day. Then the next bill. The future gets smaller, not because you lack dreams, but because reality keeps taxing them. This is the emotional cost people rarely count. Poor people do not just have less money. They have to spend more attention on money. They think about it in the shower, in traffic, at work, while eating, while pretending to listen, while trying to sleep. The balance is always somewhere in the mind. Not as a number, as a pressure. And pressure changes people. It makes them quicker to anger, slower to trust, less likely to take healthy risks, more likely to choose immediate relief over long-term gain because long-term gain has failed to protect them before. Then outsiders look at the immediate relief and say, "That is why they are poor." They see the takeout meal, not the 14-hour day behind it. They see the finance phone, not the need to stay reachable for work. They see the missed payment, not the payroll delay. They see the payday loan, not the broken car that made Monday impossible. They see the cigarette, the lottery ticket, the small purchase, the one visible irrational thing, and they build an entire moral theory around it. The poor are judged most harshly for the purchases that make their lives feel briefly less poor. That does not mean every decision is good. Some decisions are bad. Some spending is avoidant. Some debt is unnecessary. Some mistakes are real mistakes. But that is exactly the point. Poor people are human, and human beings make mistakes. The difference is that some humans can make mistakes inside systems designed to absorb them, while others make mistakes inside systems designed to multiply them. A person with money can be late, tired, distracted, impulsive, unlucky, embarrassed, sick, grieving, overwhelmed, and still remain financially intact. A poor person often cannot. One mistake can turn into a month. One month can turn into a record. One record can turn into a higher price. One higher price can turn into less margin. Less margin can turn into the next mistake. And soon the original event is no longer visible. People only see the condition it helped create. They call it bad credit. They call it instability. They call it irresponsibility. They call it poor choices. They rarely call it what it is. Compounding. Not the kind that builds wealth quietly in the background while you sleep. The other kind. The kind that builds penalties. The kind that builds stress. The kind that turns delay into damage and damage into cost and cost into another delay. Poverty compounds too. It just compounds in reverse. And once you see that, you understand why the first layer of financial stability changes more than the numbers. The first real cushion does not make you rich. It makes you less breakable. It allows a tire to remain a tire. It allows a late paycheck to remain annoying. It allows a doctor visit to happen before the problem becomes an emergency. It allows a mistake to end where it started. That is what poor people are missing. Not character. Not intelligence. Not effort. Space. Space between a bill and a fee. Space between a fee and a crisis. Space between a crisis and a life change. Space to be tired without becoming late. Space to be unlucky without being punished for months. Space to make one ordinary human mistake and not have it become evidence against your entire future. Because that is the real difference. The rich are not people who never make mistakes. They are people whose mistakes are allowed to stay small. The poor make one mistake and have to meet every institution it awakens. The bank. The landlord. The employer. The mechanic. The collector. The clinic. The insurance company. The credit bureau. Each one takes a piece. Not always a large piece, but enough. Enough money. Enough time. Enough sleep. Enough dignity. And after the pieces are taken, someone will still ask why they did not make better choices. But choices do not happen in empty space. They happen inside pressure. They happen with a balance that is already low, a car that is already old, a body that is already tired, a job that already does not pay enough, a landlord who already has the next tenant in mind, a bank that already prices you as risky, and a month that already had no room for surprise. So when people say poor people cannot afford to make one mistake, they are not speaking metaphorically. They mean one mistake can cost more than the mistake. One missed payment can cost more than the payment. One repair can cost more than the repair. One sick day can cost more than the day. One delay can cost more than acting early would have cost, but acting early required money that was not there. This is the trap. Not one dramatic collapse. 1,000 small conversions where the cheaper problem becomes unavailable because you could not afford it in time. And eventually, the person changes. They become cautious in ways that look like lack of ambition. They become defensive in ways that look like attitude. They become exhausted in ways that look like laziness. They become private in ways that look like dishonesty. They stop explaining because explanations have never lowered the fee, reversed the penalty, fixed the car, or made the rent smaller. They learn that dignity often means saying less than the situation deserves. That silence gets misread too. But underneath it is a calculation running all the time. What can wait? What will punish me first? Who can I ask? What will it cost later? What happens if I am wrong? What happens if I am right but still cannot pay? How long can I hold this together before something else breaks? This is not freedom. It is not even simply poverty. It is life without margin, where every ordinary mistake is treated like a structural failure because there is nothing underneath to catch it. And that is why the first step out, when it happens, feels so strange. Not glamorous. Not cinematic. Just strange. The first time a surprise bill arrives and you can pay it without rearranging the entire month, something in your nervous system does not believe it. You wait for the second consequence. You wait for the catch. You wait for the punishment that usually comes attached. But nothing happens. The bill is paid. The month continues. The mistake ends. That is what stability actually feels like at first. Not wealth. Silence. No call from the bank. No notice on the door. No declined card. No late fee. No shame math in a checkout line. No choosing between the mechanic and the dentist, between the phone and the electricity, between eating properly and staying current. Just a problem, handled at the size it arrived. That is the privilege people confuse with virtue. When your mistakes stay small, you get to believe you are simply better at life. You get to believe your calm is personality, your planning is wisdom, your recovery is discipline. Some of it may be. But some of it is margin. Some of it is the quiet protection of money sitting behind you, absorbing impact before the world gets to see you struggle. Poor people do not lack the ability to recover. They lack the room to recover before the next hit lands. And until that changes, one mistake will never be just one mistake. It will be the beginning of a chain. A fee, a delay, a balance, a score, a denial, a higher price, a worse option, a shorter temper, a smaller future. Not because the person failed harder than anyone else. Because the system charges the highest penalties to the people standing closest to the edge. That is the part no spreadsheet fully captures. Poverty is not only having less. It is being allowed to survive fewer mistakes.